Hello and welcome. We are going to use this lesson to be one of a series of lessons where we talk about data structures. And data structures are common throughout almost every programming language. And we're going to talk about data structures in relationship to JavaScript, really what they are and how to think about them. It's more a way of thinking about data structures as containers. That's part of the purpose of these videos is for you to think about them as something that holds something. So, for example, let's just say we have our beverage equals juice. Okay. So we've obviously here declared a string, and this string here, it's a container. It holds all of these letters. You can use this container and add more letters to it. You can you can manipulate the letters, you can arrange the letters, you can trim white space off of the letters in them. There are lots of ways you can manipulate the structure. You could manipulate it inside of a loop when you're constantly manipulating the string, or you could directly manipulate different characters in the string. So if you've gone through some of the exercises you've seen before, you're already familiar with strings. But what you really need to do when you're learning about data structures for any given language is to understand all of the methods that relate to that data structure. So part of really being a good programmer is knowing how to look things up. And one of the things you want to do here is look up string methods for JavaScript. So when we say methods, a method is technically a function that belongs to a class. So string methods in JavaScript will get you that simple Google phrase will get you exactly where you need to go. So if I go into a new window and I do string methods JavaScript, then you see you get a bunch of results. You see I already had clicked on the W3 Schools one here, and then I also clicked on MDN. In looking at these two different resources for you all, I will say there are a lot of senior developers that kind of look down on W3 Schools, but do not let that deter you. W3 Schools is an excellent resource. I think as a junior, when you're first starting off, it's actually a better resource than MDN. MDN tends to be more thorough and more comprehensive. But W3 Schools, in my personal opinion, is easier to understand and more clear when you're beginning. So we're going to use the W3 Schools. And if you look down here, if you scroll down just a little bit, you get all of the JavaScript string methods. Now, do you have to memorize all of these methods? Absolutely not. If you're preparing for something like a pairing assessment or a job interview or something like that, you may want to browse through these and just be familiar with them. If they let you Google something in the assessment, some do, some don't. Um, you could go and look up this page as a refresher. But what's really most important is that you familiarize yourself with the types of things that you can do with the string. And then, based on this page, then come back to look at this for reference. And after a while, a lot of these will become muscle memory. So let's just talk about a couple of these, right? So if we have var beverage equals juice, if you may remember from your studies, strings are kind of like arrays in the sense that each character in the string has an index. This is index of 0, the j is index of 0, this is index of 1, index of 2, etc. So if you did console.log beverage 0, then obviously you're going to get the j, right? Now, we're going to keep using the console log just to go through and just review some things. But these are the types of things that you need to know if you're going to be solving problems, what they call toy problems, sample test problems, interview questions, pairing assessment questions. There's certain very common string methods that you see a lot, or that you may, I should really say, that are tools in your toolkit that you may want to use in order to solve certain problems. So you see the indexing. So you have beverage at 0, beverage at 1. Obviously, this would be a U. So sometimes, if you're inside of a loop, you might be for var I equals 0. And if this is, old hat to you and, very old, you can always watch this on double time or skip ahead here. I is less than beverage.length I plus plus. At every step of the game here, if you really wanted to, you could then console.log beverage add I. So using the brackets in order to call variable content, and later when we look at objects, you'll be setting, it's actually setting keys and stuff on objects. Using the brackets to call something that's not a fixed value, that's inside of a loop or is a variable inside here, is a very common thing that you'll see in programming. So here we loop through the whole thing, and then at each step we console.log beverage add I. So we didn't hard code 0, 1, 2, 3. We let the loop do it. So we've gone through here and um, we've actually spit out each character here in that string. Okay, so let's take this loop. We're just going to comment this out. Let's console.log. Let's talk about another method, substring. So getting a substring of a string is also an extremely common practice in programming. So you could console.log beverage dot substring. Now, when you have a substring, one way to think about the substring, it has two parameters. If you start typing substring, you see what happened here? You start typing substring, and then you put in the parenthesis, and it gives you the clues here. So it's saying, oh wait, so look, there's a start, it's a number, and then there's an end, that's a number, and it'll actually go through here, and it's almost like giving you code hints. So the start is an index. So if we start at 1, comma, and then you see now this is no longer bold, but this is bold. It's a hint. Saying, oh, well, he's asking for an end, 3. So what would beverage.substring 1, 3 return? Well, I want you to think about the 1 and the 3. These are indices. And think about a knife going at each space. So this is index of 0 right here, right? So think of a knife here at 0. And then, but we really have a knife at 1. So you have a knife at 1 and it cuts the juice. You can't cut juice because it's a liquid, but you get what I'm saying. And you have another here, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. So 3 here, the knife goes there. So we get UI because there was a knife at 1 and 3. Slice is the exact same thing for a string. Now, do not use splice for strings. That is not a string method. We use that for arrays. If you look in here and you look at the methods here, you see that there is no splice. So please do not make that mistake. All right. So talking about knives and cutting up strings, let's do another one here. Let's console.log. Let's put in here, let's say express toll, right? Word equals express toll. So we're going to console.log word. We're going to talk about split. So this is another extremely common method that you're going to see in programming. When you split, it basically splits up the string according to which directions you give it. So if you just give it an empty string like this, and then you run it, then it basically splits everything just into all different pieces, right? Because there's no space in here. You may not be able to see it well in the video. This would be a space. There's no space. So when you put a split and you don't put any space in there, it splits up the string into an array, right? And each character in here, each element in the array is a different character from the string. But that's not what I wanted to talk about in relation to the cutting. Is that a lot of times, yeah, you could split on just an empty string, but what's even more common is to split on a character. So here, if we split on this dash, we put the dash right here. I like to say it's like a lumberjack comes with an axe. And when you say split, think of a lumberjack splitting that string on whatever you give it. So the lumberjack is really, he's like he or she is like a focused character, right? So this focused person is saying, listen, you gave me this, I'm going to chop right here. So you chop on that, then you get this, right? So when you chop on this character, it obliterates it, right? The axe has killed that dash, and you get these two things here. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, it can be also an alpha. It can be an alphanumeric character, right? Alpha character. If you did express and you split on the R, you want to pause the video and tell me what you think is going to come out. Okay, so when you run it, you get express because it's split on the R. It got rid of the R, destroyed by the X, and we got that. And but mind you, this is returning an array that has two strings inside of it. So you're not returning a string here. This is a string method. Split is a string method, but it returns an array. Okay? You can split on more than one character. If you split on pre, you see, the axe comes right down on the pre, and you get XS. X and SS is two different words. Okay? So that's how split works. Now, if you don't pass it anything at all, then it just gives you the entire string as one element inside of an array, not as commonly used. So don't get confused about split. There are lots of things that you can do. What's most frequent is splitting on a character, right? But look at this. If we did split on the S, we get express, and then remember the lumberjack comes, chops this S out of the picture, creates an empty, kind of like an empty place, and then cuts this one out as well. So we get two empty ones. Again, not common that you would do that on something like this, but it's good to know how it works. Okay, so that's split. Let's just keep that string just like that is now. So we're just gonna say console.log word express, and then we're gonna do word.concat. So this is another fairly common word.concat toll. So we got express and toll. Why is there a space there? Because there's a space at the end here, right? So we could say var short, trimmed word equals word dot trim. So this trims that word, cleans off all the white space. So we could do console.log trimmed word dot concat toll, and we just get it, and then now we get a spread toll. It's not like a drink or something. But if we do this, press toll, you see? So it's just trimming off the end. So concat is to join two strings together. But that's, actually, when I'm coding, I never use concat. A lot of times I'll just concat with plus signs. So you can always do console.log trimmed word plus toll. Right? And get express toll. I just like to use the plus sign because it's less typing, and programmers are always looking for shortcuts. Right. Okay, another common one that we have is, let's say that this is express, right? Yeah, just like that, express. We can say var found equals, or you know what? Let's not even declare a second variable here. Let's do console.log word dot includes e. So obviously, express contains e, and this returns a Boolean. Another string method that we have here that returns something that's not a string. This returns a Boolean. So of course, express includes e. But if we had, something like I, then express does not include I, and it's false. And so you see in here, if you look at the includes, Any one of these methods, when you go in, it'll give you a definition and usage, and and so on and so forth. And they even have a start one, so it's the position to start from. And so you could start searching at a certain position, right? But you know that's something that you can play with. I want you to focus on some of the most common uses that we have for a lot of these methods, right? Okay, so you're thinking of a string as a container. The container can have lots of different things. You can keep adding to a container. We'll talk a lot more about this in our unit on accumulator problems. But so you can always say something like, you have word equals express, and you can say word equals word plus um, plain, right? And if we console.log word, we use the plus sign to concatenate. And that word, I think you're hearing this word here, concatenate, means to put things together, especially when we're talking about strings. So, um, you know, you can keep adding to that word, right? Word equals word plus express line, right? So, in just to just bring the point home, um, in relation to looking at this as a container, if this word is express and this word length, we could say our new word equals an empty string, right? And we could say, we could loop through every character in that word, right? And we can say new word plus equals. So you're taking it, it's just like new word equals new word plus, same thing as this. New word equals new word plus word at I. And then console.log, what's our new word? Our new word is express. So we just looped through the original word. We took the new word as a container, right? And we just kept adding on to it. So what I was first going to do was just do new word plus equals. It's the same thing as new word equals new words plus, boy, can't type today. So new word plus equals word at I. It's the same thing. But you could say new word plus equals word at I plus, and then just add an extra character. I don't know, we'll just put a Z in there just to be ornery. So now we have expresses. That's like the really fast express lane, right? So you here, this is a peek into what we're talking about of an accumulator pattern. We have this new word is a container. And then every time we loop through, we're adding to that new word. But we're not just adding a word, we add the letter, but then we add the Z. So every time we add a letter and a Z, a letter and a Z, letter and a Z, letter from the string and a Z, letter from the string and a Z, and so on. Okay, so hopefully this helps illuminate strings a little bit more. This might have been old hat, like I said, for some of you. And in the next lesson, we'll go on to our next data structure.